It's time to fix a mistake from a previous lab, and it's only going to take us like 8 to 10 labs to do it. This lab is the start of an extended sequence I'm calling Advanced Cloud Security Problem Solving. The objective is to show you specific skills, but also help you understand how to think your way through a problem. These labs are meant to operate in order and do not stand alone. Now, how many are in the sequence? I've got 8 mapped out so far, but it might vary a little bit once we get into the weeds of these, just because of how the timing goes on each individual lab. All right, so with that said, let's address the gremlin in the room from our lab on implementing resource control policies. And I made another oopsie in that lab, 2 mistakes in that lab. And I've known about these for a little while, but they didn't break anything currently running. And the real fix to meet the same objective we are trying to execute on requires us having a solid block of lab time to get into some deep cloud security mysticism. Okay, so what happened? Well, the core problem is I was rushing on the resource control policy lab because it was a busy week, and I applied and tested it incorrectly, so I didn't pick up on that error. A friend of CloudSL, Chris Ferris, and I were presenting together at the Amazon reInvent conference, and he went to test it because it was part of our presentation, and we figured out what was going on. And the core of it is you cannot use bucket tags in a condition. So let's go ahead and pull up the JSON again. And this is something that I knew, but I kind of had forgotten about. And if you think about it, if you recall, our objective was that we wanted to restrict buckets within our organization restrict buckets that were tagged this particular way so they could only be accessed from within our organization. Well, that doesn't work because when you go look at tags, tags will work for objects in S3, but not for buckets. Oh, you can apply the tag to a bucket, but you're not able to actually do the assessment on it. Now, the other one was a little bit more esoteric. We used AWS Source Org ID, and that's actually when you have service to service talking. So service 1 talking to service 2. What we really wanted it to have is one known as principal. I'm spelling wrong. Principal org ID. And we're going to show you that because we're going to fix that early in the lab. So I actually had those 2 mistakes in these labs, and so it wasn't going to work correctly. Source org ID meant when we tried to apply it, it actually wouldn't allow any human access to anything because there was no source org ID. And then principal org ID was the one that we should have used, and then we also weren't able to apply that tag properly. The thing is I knew both of these, and I still made the mistake. And even after working in cloud for, I think I'm pushing 15 years now, even somebody like myself is still going to make these mistakes. And so the end result, the way we set this up is it didn't really do anything because this is never evaluated because it's not able to evaluate that bucket ID tag, and the source org is the wrong tag, so it caused all sorts of problems. And that's a huge limitation of resource control policies. You can't actually use them to manage access based on bucket tags, which is unfortunate. So look, as long as I've been doing this, I still learn every day. And then I forget just as much every night when I lay my weary head to rest. But this is a great opportunity to go deep on security automation and guardrails. So we're just going to F it and do it the hard way. Just because I can't write an RCP to achieve our desired outcome doesn't mean I can't do it. I just have to do it a different way. And I've been building security automations since before Amazon organizations even existed, never mind tools like service control policies and the other cool tools we have now. Heck, I even founded a cloud security automation startup that was acquired by a company called Firemon. As a reminder, security invariants are rules that prevent security issues from happening, and that's what we were trying to do with our RCP. Unlike other defenses, invariant should always be true, and there shouldn't be exceptions or ways around it. So in our case, our objective was if a bucket is tagged as sensitive, that we want to restrict access to only within our organization. That's a nice, clean invariant. And when we look at invariants, there's multiple ways to actually implement them. And these are typically usable in every different cloud provider. You could start with infrastructure as code scanning. So if you require all deployments to go through continuous integration pipelines and go through infrastructure as code scanning, you can actually fix stuff there before it ever gets deployed. Then we have our organizations-based policies like service control policies, resource control policies, and declarative policies, all the ones that we've been using in these labs. And those are a very powerful tool for invariants, and every cloud provider has their own versions of them. There's also configuration settings themselves, which is what declarative policies now allows us to set. But in some of the cloud providers, or pretty much all of them, there's at least a few little checkboxes you can click to enforce rules at scale. And then finally, we have our the ones we've used are identity-based policies. But there's another option we haven't really gotten into much, and that is automation guardrails. And this is either bringing your own automation or using something built into the provider. So again, in our case, our intended invariant, our desired outcome is that if we tag a bucket with a classification of sensitive, it can't be accessed from outside our organization. Okay, well, in our situation, we now learn that the organizations-based policies can't help us because we can't set a condition on a bucket tag, and we don't want to have to go around and tag all of the objects. We aren't locking things down using infrastructure as code for our environment, so that's not going to be the route to enforce this. And there aren't any configuration settings like block public access or identity-based policies that can do what we want. And what that leaves us is building our own automation guardrail. An automation guardrail looks for a condition and then either loops someone in to fix it or performs an auto remediation. And since we want this to function like as an invariant, so it's always enforced, we're going to go with auto remediation so that anytime a bucket is tagged as sensitive, we change the configuration settings on it to lock it down to only being accessible from within our organization. So to pull this off, we have to do a few things. We need to be able to identify all buckets that are tagged as sensitive, either currently or when a bucket is newly tagged as sensitive, or if the tag is removed. Now, of course, what we're not addressing here is you got to really have good control over who can set those tags. Otherwise, they can just change the security. Then we want to determine if the bucket is accessible from outside the organization. Remember, this is more than just public. This means we don't want the bucket shareable to any accounts outside of our Amazon organization. Then we want to update the security controls to restrict access to just our organization when that tag is applied, or if we detect that that tag was previously applied. And then we need to track any configuration changes, such as somebody going in and changing a bucket policy to ensure that the access isn't opened up to outside the organization. We have to have a way to enforce the rules so that somebody can't go ahead and circumvent them. There is a lot of nuance hidden in those requirements, and this isn't a simple one, and it's not going to be a one and done automation. For example, do we want to allow people to take the sensitive tag off the bucket, or do we want only some people to do that? Do we want to build that into the invariant or not? Do we want to restrict things to existing accounts or slap our control or only use this auto remediation on new accounts after we check with the owner to validate something first? Who's allowed to change the tags? A lot of like nuances and issues. And the other piece of this is that there are multiple ways to solve automation problems. In some cases, we might be able to use Amazon config's the name of the service, or maybe we want to use a third-party tool, or maybe we want to do it ourselves. And where do we want to run the automation, and who do we want to maintain it? This is what we're going to address in the next batch of labs. And I'm going to walk you through how I think my way through the problem. And we're going to implement a common automation pattern that I like to use. This particular desired outcome, it's a great one for us to dig into this auto remediation issues and guardrails because it has just enough built-in complexity that we can really explore the foundations of automation. Now, one of the first things we need to address is this going to be real-time or scan-based? And the answer is yes. One of the first decisions we have to make is it going to operate as changes are made, or if it's going to scan for misconfiguration that's already in place? Personally, I prefer to implement any of my auto remediation guardrails in as real time as possible. I don't think you can rely on hourly or daily scans, which is what most tools do for a true invariant. In our case, this means watching for the API calls to know when a bucket is tagged, when the tag is taken off, or when any kind of access is changed, like a bucket policy. That said, we also need time-based scans, because what if an account is moved to a different organizational unit than where we have our variant and then back in? Or maybe we missed the API call because even Amazon's own services can't guarantee they're going to catch and deliver every single API call. So for this first block of labs, we're going to start with EventBridge. And if you recall from our Security Hub lab, EventBridge is the AWS native service for handling events. In our case, we already have built consolidation of all of our Security Hub events, and thus things like GuardDuty and Access Analyzer and other services, into our security audit account, and we wrote some rules to send out emails if bad things happen. But EventBridge can do a lot more, and there are 3 key features that we're going to use to build the core of our real-time automation. The first is you can create a custom event buses that only receive certain events. And in our case, we're going to set up an event bus in our security operations account to receive events that are going to trigger auto remediations. Second feature is that with CloudTrail enabled, we can collect all the API call events in real time. Anything that goes to CloudTrail, we can get those API calls in real time through EventBridge. Then we can also forward events from one event bus to another, even across accounts. And we're going to use this capability to help us consolidate across all of the accounts within our organization that we want within scope. So this is where we're going to start. This week, we're going to fix our broken resource control policy so it just doesn't get in the way. Then we're going to set up 2 custom event buses, one in each region that we're going to use. And we're going to do this in the security operations account. In future labs, we're going to learn how to set up the rules. We're going to learn how to forward the events. We're going to learn how to use CloudFormation stack sets to deploy things in all of our accounts. We're going to build Lambda functions and even more. And remember, there are a lot of different ways to get to our desired outcome. I'm taking you down one path that I like, but this isn't the only path that I use. And I'll do my best to tell you why I make the decisions I do as we go along. And here's a little diagram that I put together for what this is going to look like. We're going to have, let me get this whiteboard fired up over here so I can draw the little lines. What we're going to have is a series of triggers, and these triggers are built as EventBridge rules, and you're going to see how to do that. The ones in red are all the ones that are going to be API calls. And then the one in blue is just going to be a time-based. So we do have different ways that we can actually execute the triggers. It can be event-based or it can be time-based, kind of like a cron job if you're ever used to that. Then we go through our flow, our actions. We're going to evaluate a few different conditions. And apologies, my little drawing isn't actually syncing up. This happens occasionally for reasons I can't figure out. But you can see it on the screens here. We're going to look for the tag. And if the tag is not there, then we're just going to go ahead and exit. And then otherwise, we're going to go through our flow of the different things that we're going to look at. So we're going to build all of this out week to week. I'm going to go ahead and try and do diagrams. I'm going to tell you how I think my way through the problem. And with that said, let's get in the lab. We're going to fix that RCP, and then we're going to create our centralized event buses in the right place. That's going to be the whole backbone of our auto remediation. I'm going to skip a lot of the preamble. Let's jump right in, and I'll talk about it as we go. As usual, log into your sign-in portal. From within your sign-in portal, we want to start in our management account, and we are going to remove that resource control policy that's broken. Now, I could fix the policy, but we don't have a use case for how we want to use it right now, so we're just going to pull it out. So let's go into AWS Organizations. Remember, you could always just search at it on the top if it's not there. Within Organizations, go to Policies and Resource Control Policies, and then our S3 Classified Sensitive. Leave the full access on because it will be a problem if you get rid of that. When we click on it, you can see the resource control policy here. Now, if you wanted to fix it, you would actually remove this section, and then you would change this to be principal. Oh, it looks like I actually already fixed it on on this one. Principal org ID. I was messing around. So yours probably says source org ID. You would change it to principal org ID. Well, we're not going to do that because we don't really have a use for this right now. And if we leave it applied somewhere, it can cause us some problems. We're going to start all over. So we're going to go in and we're going to click on first for prod, and we will detach and detach. And then we're going to go to workloads, detach, detach. And then we'll go up to the top and we'll click on delete. And we have to copy and paste the name out into the delete window here. And delete. Okay, so we've cleaned up our mistake and we don't have that bad resource control policy on. What we can do is, next is, I want you to go into the blog post and then onto basically a spare sheet of paper, or spare sheet of paper. Can't believe I said that. In my case, it's going to be my text app. And so this is the JSON in the blog post that we're going to use. And I want to pull my org ID out. And whoops, it's right here. I'm going to take my org ID, copy it, and then I'm going to switch over. And there's a place here for your org ID. Don't do the account ID yet, but do the org ID. Look at that. It even says principal org ID. Yeah, you can see I made my mistake. Now hold on to this for right now. We're going to come back to this JSON in a moment. At this point, we can close this window out. And that JSON, by the way, in the back end is for our resource policy that we're going to need for the event bus. Now, we're going to implement all of this in our security operations account. We're going to be doing a lot of heavy work, so let's just go in with either administrator or security full admin. So we're in security operations is the account that I'm in right now. And I want to go to Event Bridge. So type it in, go to Amazon Event Bridge. And within Event Bridge now, what I am going to do is actually have you switch back over to, because the JSON is kind of prepped for US East 1, we're going to prep it for US East. We're going to just switch over to US East 1. So let's go to US East 1. And from within this account, let's get that JSON all fixed up. Click on that top right corner. And I'm going to explain what this JSON is for in just a minute, but copy the account ID and paste that in where these X's are. So this is now properly formatted. And you can see that this is the policy that's going to allow us to send events from all of our other accounts. And it's going to be from any account in our organization is going to be allowed to send to our central event bus. And we're going to change the name on this. I'm going to change it on mine. Yours will already be changed. And we're going to, yeah, it's got an extra space in there. I'm going to call this security automation. Okay. So that JSON is all ready for me. I'm going to use it in just a moment. Within event buses or event bridge, click on event buses. And you can see that we don't have any, or we do have one. It's the default event bus in every account. That's not where we want to send these events. We're going to create a custom event bus that is specific just for our security events. So click on the button that says create event bus. And the name we want to use is whatever I put into that JSON there, security automation. And yep, upper and lowercase are allowed. Okay, so security automation, and it's going to be event bus for security operations automations. And encryption, we're not going to worry about it, so we'll just use an AWS owned key. And here's where that JSON comes into place. We do need to add the resource-based policy. So let's click load template. And this builds one in automatically for us. Oh, we didn't even need to use the JSON. They added that to the user interface. I'm going to read this as we go with the video. Let me go pause this for 1 sec while I double check everything. Okay, this is pretty cool. They built it all in. So what we're going to do is, let me just actually double check here. Yeah, we're going to copy and paste what we did over. So what you could do is you could actually delete all this stuff out and you could add all of these sections in, or I just gave you the JSON here. And let's take this top to finish. We'll copy it, select all, paste. Our JSON is valid and it allows all accounts in the org to put events. So allow put events from any account in our organization to this one because it's called security automation. So we should have that name correct and click create. Okay, and it's just that simple. So we have our event bus, and you do want to just double check the name here that this ARN is going to be the same ARN that's in our permissions. And it looks like I did not make any spelling mistakes, no S's at the end, nothing else. So that event bus is all good. Now this part gets easy. Go back into the upper right-hand corner. So this is going to be our central event bus. We can now send events here from all of our other organizations, and that's something we're going to do within the next couple of weeks. Let's go in the upper right-hand corner and go to Oregon, which is the other region that we have operating. You can see it just gave us the error because that event bus didn't exist. So we're going to go create event bus, and we're going to name this the same, security automation. And I can't remember what description I had in there. Security operations automations. It's good enough. We know that we own all of this. And we're going to go to the resource-based policy. So we'll hit that load template. Delete that out. Whoops. Delete that out. Now here, we have to make a change in our template. We have to go US-West-2. If you don't make this change, it will fail. A is to select all, copy it, paste it in there. JSON is valid. Oh, look, we can make it prettier. I don't really care about that. It worked. It was valid the first time. Scroll down and create. That's it. We're now set up. We have an event bus in each region, and we removed our bad resource control policy. This is the start, but we have a whole lot of stuff that we're going to be doing over the next coming months. And yes, this one will take months. So hopefully you got a little bit out of this. And remember, we set up this central event bus because this is where we can feed our events. And in our case, it's going to be those events that were on that diagram I showed for if a bucket was tagged, changing a bucket policy, removing a tag. Those are the things that we want to be looking for to make sure that we trigger our automation to apply our security controls. Not every piece is going to fully come together until we get closer to the end, but hopefully you're able to pick things up as we go. With that, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next one.